My superpower is engineering. I've been a roboticist almost all my life now. I think engineering is just as creative as the arts. Engineers, we solve problems. It impacts the world. It makes a difference. Without IEEE, I don't think I would have the network that I have. Anyone can get involved with IEEE USA at any time. There's an immense amount of value for anyone at any career stage.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to today's IEEE USA live stream webinar, LinkedIn and Standing Out. I'm your host, Jonathan Cho. IEEE USA's goal is to create a program that's valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. As such, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. We value your opinions and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and share your thoughts. I'll now pass it off to our guest for today's webinar, IEEE member and chair of both the IEEE Houston section and Region 5 South area, Christopher Sanderson, who will introduce our presenter. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you, Jonathan. How's everyone doing out there? I have the pleasure of actually introducing Colonel Retired Joe Franke. He is a West Point graduate who's had a full U.S. Army warfare and logistics career. He is commanded at all levels, from the platoon all the way through military installations. Post-military, he's used his logistics skills to work on infrastructure projects in the U.S. and internationally. Currently, he is an author, coach, and search consultant who advises executives from transitioning from military to civilian. Most often, he helps them better understand themselves as well as helping them build their LinkedIn bridge. From where he now stands, he gives his advice freely. But over his 40 years of leading multifunctional teams worldwide in everything from engineering to logistics, life sciences, technology, aviation, environmental services, and other startup companies of both Fortune 100 and 500 companies in both the private as well as public sector. He is the co-author of LinkedIn, the 5-minute drill for executives network success. Again, Colonel Franke, I thank you for joining us, and I look forward to your words of wisdom.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris. I really appreciate the organization. I appreciate the team that invited me here and all the discussions that got me from the discussion phase to being able to present to you today. So IEEE, what a neat video. I mean, you all are advancing technology for humanity. And so one of the things we're going to talk about today is standing out on LinkedIn. And so in standing out, it's perfect subject for an engineer. Because how do you have to stand out? Well, if we're in a crowd, right, the people that stand out are the people that are physically taller than you. So consequently, they were just born with that. They were issued that. So if you wanted to stand out, you might bring something small to step on. They would give you a little bit additional height, okay? And being engineers, you would make sure that was safe and what you were going to be able to do. And so as engineers for IEEE Advanced Technology for Humanity, what you're really doing is you're torchbearers. You're bringing a torch to the world. And so a lot of you say, well, how do I make my torch brighter? How do I go from carrying a candle for my organization to being a torchbearer for my organization? So if you want to help the organization stand out and be a torchbearer for advancing technology for humanity, well, then you got to step up too. You got to stand out. How do you take your candle and turn that into a torch, or at the very least, be able to raise your candle higher so that it can be seen, so that you can stand out? So the first question you have to ask yourself, when you stand out is, what do you bring to the table? Okay. What do you have? What are your experiences? What are the assets? What are the skills? What are the stories that you have that you make a difference? And as we go through this, you're going to see how important it is to be able to tell those stories and measure those stories about what you bring to the table. Where is it you want to go? The nice thing about IEEE, I mean, they have kind of said where they want to go. They want to advance technology for humanity. So they know where they're headed. And so how can you help them get there? And one of the things that we'll talk about in here is not only how do you help yourself, but how do you help your organization? How do you raise a torch for IEEE? And it's all in the power of LinkedIn and what you bring to the table. Next slide. So LinkedIn, is a giant. It's a behemoth. You're going to have to deal with it whether you like it or not. The only people that are not going to have to deal with it in some form or fashion are people that are choosing to leave the stage. And even those of us in our fifth or sixth career, like myself, you're never quite away from LinkedIn because you always have something to bring to the table in what you're doing. So here's some of the numbers, okay? Total users in the US, 196 million. Worldwide, right under 800 million. Income breakout, amounts of millennials. Total number of open jobs in the world on LinkedIn, 15 million. Okay. There are 3 people hired every minute on LinkedIn. So if you're in the job mode or switching or in transition, I mean, this is a place where, you get seen. Content and creation during the pandemic has increased 60%. Now that'll seem like a big number, but we'll see the rest of the number on the next slide. Next slide, please. 2 people every second join LinkedIn. So that's 86,500, per day. So after about 2 weeks, that's another million, that they're adding. I mean, how would you like to have those kind of numbers joining IEEE? You'd settle for just a microcosm of that. Some interesting breakouts. One thing I want to point out to you that we're going to talk about is professional headshots, your profile picture. And we're going to talk specifically about that. This is LinkedIn's own statistic. You get 14 times more profile views with a professional headshot. Okay. We talked a little bit about content creation. So if you have liked something or you have done a post on LinkedIn anytime in your life, I mean, you're in the top 5% of LinkedIn. About 94% of the people don't do anything other than maybe read or lurk or whatever you want to call that. So next slide. What's your mission or goal? Okay. We talked about where do you want to go on the very first slide. Some people, and this is just 6 bullets that we put on the slide. I mean, this can kind of be infinite because everybody's an individual. Some people want to find employment. In other words, they're out of work and they want to land a job. Some people are in a job. They don't like the situation or for whatever reason, but they want new employment. Some people want a better network. Some people love where they're at. They just want to get promoted. Some people are trying to change sectors. I have a lot of that in the oil and gas sectors. You have engineers coming out of oil and gas trying to get into mechanical and aerospace. You might have a business. You're trying to get clients and or customers. You want to better market yourself. You're going to pivot. In other words, you're going to go from really engineering to more of a project management role. Or you're an entrepreneur and you've got some side hustle and things that you want to do on that. The reason that's important is because if you're going to build something, right, you kind of need to know where you're going to go. As engineers, if you look at the first step and what is the problem? The problem defines the goal. There's an end state, so you know where you're going. And so this is important. So if you know where you're at, where you're at today, what you want, could be one of these things or whatever you want, then there's a way to engineer a LinkedIn bridge to get you from where you are now to where you want to go. We'll also see how you can help your organization get to a different level. There's things that you can do, and we'll get into that. Next slide. Content is king on LinkedIn. Okay? Content is king. You are in a noun and verb war. Okay, and what do nouns and verbs make up? Well, if you have a noun and verb, by definition, you've got a very simple sentence. And so sentences make up paragraphs. Paragraph is really a short story, a bullet. And so it's your way of telling the story. So you're basically in a content war with whatever you're trying to do. If you're trying to get a new job, well, your content has got to be better than the content of these other people that are also competing for you. So in essence, you are competing. So how do you compete in this realm? You compete with nouns and verbs. And through your nouns and verbs, are you compelling? Are you telling a story in such a way that you are more compelling than another individual for what you want to achieve? Okay. Content is critical. Next slide. So we're going to take some time here because this is the most frequent question I think I end up describing. What is the difference between a LinkedIn profile and a resume? And believe me, there is a lot of confusion out there. And so I'm going to tell you a story. And what that story is going to do is kind of give you a good anchor for what the difference is. So Chris, who introduced me, we didn't have time because we were going to do this stuff today here in Houston. So he and I went out really early this morning, took our truck with our little John boat. We went out to the lake, and we're going to put in a trot line. So what is a trot line? Well, a trot line is an extended line that you lay out in the water. You put multiple hooks on it, and you're just hoping to have multiple chances at getting something that you can eat later, something that is worthwhile. So when Chris and I went out there, we saw this tree limb sticking up from a log in the lake. So we took our little boat over there. We tied a line to it. We brought that line back to shore, and we anchored it. And then in the John boat, we put our buckets and milk jugs and this kind of stuff. And the buckets had lines and hooks. One bucket had our bait that we were going to put on the hooks. And the milk jugs is so we could tie off on the line so we could keep the line above the water. And so once we got the line in, we start down the trot line, and we were tying off hooks. So one of the hooks I was tying off got a lot of play in it. It's going all the way to the bottom. Okay. And the reason it's going all the way to the bottom is catfish are on the bottom of that lake. So catfish are edible fish. So want to try to get that. Some of the lines just kind of going to go to the middle of the lake because there's a whole set of fish that hang out there. Some of the lines are going to be up closer to the surface, because there's edible fish that hang out up there. We don't know what we're going to catch. We don't know if we're going to catch anything. Our intent was, hey, we needed something that we were going to have for supper. We put this line out there. We're going to come and check it, and hopefully we'll have something for supper. But while Chris and I are baiting this line about 20 yards away, we hear this big splash, pow, in the water. And go, Chris, what was that? And Chris says, hey, Joe, I don't know what it was, but it was big. And it was over there by a bunch of reeds and stuff. And it was it was dragonfly season. So there's all these dragonflies hanging out over there. And while Chris and I were talking about that big splash, up it comes again, a huge largemouth bass. And off the edge of one of those reeds, he sucks in another dragonfly. And I said, God, Chris, that's a trophy. That's a monster. And Chris says, yeah. And so I said, hey, let's give it a shot. So we take the boat back because that particular fish is into dragonflies. And, Chris and I are hanging bait that, is old meat in the freezer that, our wives didn't want to mess with anymore. So he's not into that. Plus we're making a bunch of racket in the water. So we go back up to the boat. We grab us a rod and reel. Okay. We get into the tackle box. We pull out a silver spooner because, that dragonfly in the morning sun, it's highly reflective and it looks red. So I tie some red thread on there because all the people that fish this lake say, hey, these bass go crazy over red, right? So we kind of gently walk over there and we get to where we can cast that lure over there where that big old largemouth bass is working those dragonflies. So we make that cast over there. And our mission in this particular case is in about 12 seconds, we're hoping that bass hits that lure and, we have that bass. So that one cast with that lure is a resume. That trot line with all these different hooks on it, that's a LinkedIn profile. So are we going to have more luck on our LinkedIn profile or our trot line with 5 hooks or 37 or 45 hooks? Well, the more bait you hang out there, the more hooks you have on that line, the greater your chances are of getting something. And so what you want to do on a LinkedIn profile is, since it's your trot line and we're going to put, say, 45 hooks out there, then you tell me on a LinkedIn profile that you tell 45 stories that you solve problems. Now, that's not difficult for an engineer. An engineer's life is about solving problems. So can you tell your story, and all the stories of how you solve problems? So I go back again. So you're designing that one lure, that one shot as a resume. And your LinkedIn profile is really a compendium of stories that say, hey, what do you bring to the table? So let's talk a little bit more about the resume. The resume is a 2-dimensional document. It's kind of like a black and white photograph of you. It's a snapshot. Okay. And mainly it has what you're able to do from an IQ perspective. What's your LinkedIn profile? Your LinkedIn profile is, hey, it's your IQ, your EQ, it's everything you bring to the table in your multiple personas. Okay. So you might have a persona as a soccer coach. You might have a persona, as a den leader of Cub Scouts. You might have a persona, as a person that, continually educates themselves. And there's all these places to hang, these stories on a LinkedIn profile. So resume is something you use. You create it uniquely against a job description or position specification. So a lot of times people will send me, Joe, I'm going to send you my resume. And I said, but I haven't sent you a position specification. And he said, well, I just want to send you my resume. And I said, well, my view of a resume is a unique construct to accomplish what you want, and that is very competitively compete for the job that's on that position specification. Everything else comes from your LinkedIn profile. So one of the questions I frequently get asked is, okay, Joe, I don't have much of a LinkedIn profile, but I have this extensive resume. And I said, okay, well, then make sure everything that you have on this extensive resume is on your LinkedIn profile. Because my clients are going to want to know why you have any difference between the two. And so they say, well, what's that like, Joe? And I said, let's put it in terms you understand. I said, imagine the LinkedIn profile is your warehouse. And every once in a while, you have a truck that backs up to that warehouse, and it's called a resume. So based on what that truck ordered, then you take your little forklift and you fill this truck with the pallets of information from your LinkedIn profile warehouse. So LinkedIn profile is really an oil portrait of you. It's got color, it's got pitch. It can be done as a realistic oil portrait. It can be done as a romantic oil portrait, because you're the designer. Remember, what is it you want to accomplish? Where you want to go? Start out with the end in mind. The resume is your response to specific requirements. Okay. If you don't remember anything else, remember the fish story, because you know what? We're going to come back to that off and on. Next slide. Overt versus covert nexus. Okay. How do you find people? How do you get what you want? Well, you overtly do it. In other words, one of the ways it's happened since the beginning of time, two people meet out near the pyramids and say, hey, Joe, my name's Chris. Hey, how you doing, Chris? I need help with this. Okay, so that's been around for ages. Overtly, two people communicating. Okay. What hasn't been around is the covert methodology. The covert methodology is, hey, what is it that you need or want? And is it on your LinkedIn profile? Because there's somebody searching 24/7, 365 for you. So you can find them. Say you're looking for a job. You still have a responsibility to go look. But if you build a world-class LinkedIn profile, people like me will find you for requirements that, we're given. And what I'm saying here is use both. You've already seen that by the numbers that the LinkedIn platform is probably one of the greatest networking platforms. And I don't want to use a definition like great. It's a big platform. Whether you like it or not, it's there. And so, where are you going to be out there? So when I run a search, for example, using 10 search words up in the search box, I'm going to get the first 400. Are you going to come up 395 out of 400, or are you going to come up 41 out of 400? If you come up 41, I'll probably get to see you. But if you come up 395, I'm probably not getting down there. So I just want you to think of it in terms of that. Next slide. IQ versus EQ. Okay, so we're not finished with the fish story, because not all the bait you fish with is the same. Okay, so consequently, your resume is more or less about your IQ. When you think about the position specification, is have you done this? Do you have X amount of years of experience in that? And you're answering that. But the beautiful thing about a LinkedIn profile is you have all kinds of places to tell your story. And a lot of them can be the EQ part. Like, where do you volunteer? What do you do? Those volunteer portions, they have content that you could put in there. Okay, so not all the bait you fish with is the same. Next slide. Now we're actually getting into the profile. Okay. The others were kind of what I wanted to touch on conceptually so you could kind of see at least where I'm coming from. And some of the times I don't think that transfers like, in way we write books and stuff. So the profile picture, it is very important to you. It is your interview snapshot. If you're thinking about being considered for something, whatever it is, hey, you want a professional headshot. You already seen LinkedIn's numbers. If you have a professional headshot, you're going to be 14 times, you have a 14 times better chance of being looked at. In reality, it's the image you project. So neither Chris nor I are going to have, the picture as our profile picture of this big largemouth bass that we caught when Chris threw that lure out there. No, we're probably going to be in a coat and tie because we're both professional, engineers, and that is what we're trying to portray. It's the image that we're trying to project. And hey, you only get 20 seconds on a first impression, and you're having first impressions online now too. Not only do you have it in real life, at the coffee shop or when you go in the office for the interview, all that kind of stuff, that's happened to you online. So be ready, be square. Next slide. The headline. The headline is right below your profile picture. And it's the most valuable real estate on the internet. Okay. And what I'm saying is, I'm not saying it's the most valuable real estate on LinkedIn. I'm saying it's the most valuable real estate on the internet. So LinkedIn recently changed to allow you to use 220 characters there. Used to be 120. And so you kind of got to think through and think out, what you're doing, with this headline. So what I have listed there, that's my headline. Okay. So I've got CEO and board member. And so I'm just going to explain the rationale for me, but in the end, you should be able to explain the rationale for yourself. So no search person is going to put the word A and D or anything else. So those are all wasted, connectors. So these are all types of things that people might search for: CEO, board member. So those two are probably the most important to me because I want to be found for board level positions where somebody's going to, pay or provide stock or something like that. I do enough of the volunteer stuff. So that has helped me. So I've gone on 2 boards now. So that's accomplished that objective. I'm a LinkedIn coach, speaker, and consultant. I'm doing that with you right now. I'm speaking and giving you ideas, and also consult. So I've written a book along with Lori Ruff. It's called LinkedIn, the 5-Minute Drill. Chris talked about that. I do executive search. I'm a project manager more or less in my former life. I help people with LinkedIn strategy and storytelling. We're talking about the importance on that. So when you storytell, what you're doing is you're branding yourself. What is your brand? And so I'm an advisor, mentor, confidant. And hey, I'm talking to you on this thing. So I'm a guest podcast, TV, and radio host. And by putting that, I'm having people contact me, say, Joe, would you consider doing a podcast for us? Joe, would you consider doing a short TV thing for us? So this headline's built with what I want to accomplish. What is it that you want to accomplish? What is it that you want people to know about you? Are you trying to get promoted, or are you trying to get a new job? Then, hey, what is it that you bring to the table? This is kind of the short nugget to it. The headline. It's really important. It's valuable. It's worth your immediate time. Next slide. The About section is the next section in LinkedIn. Okay. It's your virtual introduction and handshake. It needs to be written in the first person, and it really matters. Okay. And the first three sentences of this About section, the About section is about 2,000 characters, but the first three sentences shows up when somebody opens your profile. And so what you want on those first three sentences is, hey, what do you bring to the table? What's important that you want to know, and show me that you can measure your production. Okay. So in my case, a lot of it's public service, so I don't have profit and loss and those kind of things. So mine are 40 years. I do strategic projects. They're up in the 8 billion with as many as a large amount of people. So that's what I've got up there. And so why do I say that? So when somebody's going to open your profile and they're looking for you for an opportunity, what they're going to do is they're going to look at your profile photo. Are you show ready? Are you ready to go to an interview? Hey, is your headline, does it match up with what I searched on up here? And does your first three sentences tell me that you can measure your production? So, for example, if you're an engineer, senior project engineer, hey, I've worked on 16 projects with project teams between 2 and 27. They were valued between $12.6 million and $172 million. They were all completed on time and under budget. Okay. That says you can produce. So the beautiful thing about the About section is it's not bound by time, chronology. When we get into the Experience section next, it's going to be bound by chronology. So this is your opportunity to say, hey, what is it that you bring to the table? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to be found for? What's important to you? Okay. Very important. First three sentences. Now, one thing I did not talk about, and I'm going to go back and talk about it because I'm saying that the three most important things are your profile photo, the headline, and the first three sentences of your About section. But in LinkedIn, you also have a background photo. And that background photo should be, hey, what is it that you do? What is important to you? So if you're an engineer, it should be some sort of engineering pictures. For example, for the lady that did the introduction video, I would expect 2 or 3 pictures with her, and not necessarily her, but the robot she works with, or robotics, because she says she's a robots person. So that background picture ought to immediately tell me that I'm looking at a person that is a roboticist. So whatever you are, that background picture ought to convey that. And these 3 things are important. Okay. The background picture, your profile picture, the headline, the first 3 sentences of your About section, because what happens? When I open up your profile, or the HR department open up your profile, or any recruiter on the planet, that's what we see. We're going to make a decision in about 10 seconds whether or not we're going to open up the rest of your profile. I mean, this is a busy world. We got to make some tough decisions. So what you want to do is you want us to open up that profile and go read more. Because if you earn my trust on the first 10 or 15 seconds, I'm going to give you the other 45. And then, hey, if you're feeding me what I need, then I'm going to be going everywhere I need to go in your profile. The About section, it's your virtual handshake, needs to be written in the first person. Think about it. You don't get introduced and shake hands with somebody by saying you're a third party. And these items are going to coffee for you maybe 36 or 37 times a day. Because what you're doing is you're actually going to meet somebody for coffee. It's just virtual. So, make sure you show up right. Next slide. Your experience section. Your experience section are bound by time. They need to be in bullet format. Okay. And hey, what do you bring to the table? Remember, qualitative and quantitative metrics matter, especially quantitative. In other words, how do you measure your production? Well, okay, if I say, well, okay, one item would be, hey, we had a good session today. It was high quality. Well, that's kind of qualitative. And if I ask a little kid out there where we were fishing, how many fish did you catch today? Well, I caught 6, but 3 got away. Okay, that is a beautiful quantitative bullet because we can measure that person's efficiency, right? You got enough information to measure. So I picked, these are 2 of my bullets. One is a quantitative, and it's probably my best example, 1 sentence, where you net $880,000 a year by, renegotiating those contracts. And the other one is, hey, rescuing a Russian submarine, in support of a major operation. There's no numbers in it, but it's a high quality affair because we were the joint lead. In other words, so we handled all the transportation for that disaster. So a couple of examples. And you're trying to amplify in the project section, and we're going to get to the project section next. Next slide. Okay, the accomplishments section. You're probably using this in your profile if you have a language or if you have a patent or something like that, but it has all these other things that you can put in there. And remember when we first started this talk, when we started, do you want to be a candle bearer for IEEE or do you want to be a torch bearer? Well, one of the things in the accomplishment section is organizations. Notice I have honors and awards, publications, and organizations in purple. They're in purple because these 3 things allow up to 2,000 character descriptions. Remember, we said you're in a content war. So IEEE is in a content war with its other peer organizations. So one of the things that you want to do if you're an IEEE member is you want to have IEEE organization listed. And then what is it you do for IEEE? I mean, what do you bring to the table for IEEE? Maybe you're just a candle bearer, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm a candle bearer for several organizations, but I'm a torch bearer for others. So if you're active like Chris is in IEEE, then he's going to have some bullet comments in there. I mean, he's doing stuff at the region. He's doing stuff at the Houston office. Tell your story. Tell, 2 or 3 sentence bullets about what you bring to the table. And so organizations, you have 2,000 characters. Same thing with publications, honors, and awards. Okay. Whatever honors or awards, have you ever received an honor at work? I mean, tell your story. Have you ever received an honor in high school? Tell your story. Now, the projects is the one I want to spend some time on. But let me frame it with this. So when you first join LinkedIn, LinkedIn gives you kind of a skeleton. So when Chris and I first joined LinkedIn, we filled out something and it said Joe Frankie. Then the next thing we really ended up having to do is, okay, they gave us a bunch of menus to fill in. So what it is LinkedIn has grown over time. So there's menu after menu after menu. So you can populate all of this content in the areas that it allows you to do that. Places are your education. They allow up to 1,000 characters plus your activities and societies. In the accomplishment sections, 2,000 characters for honor, awards, publications, and organizations. Now, projects. Why have I got that in red? I've got that in red because It's the place to tell your story that you solve a problem. And I can't tell you how many senior project managers and senior engineers come to me and they have a LinkedIn profile with no projects. And I said, so you've worked all your life and you didn't do anything. And they said, no, I've done this. I can put it on my resume. So, hey, you're not going to come up in my search. So remember, you're in a content war. And my old friend, Dizzy Dean, used to say, it ain't bragging if you done it. If you've actually done it. So what is a project section? The project allows you to tell a 2,000 character story. And you can't get crazy on it. Who, what, when, where, why, and how you got it done. What were the metrics? Did you make money? Did you save money? What did you do? Increase efficiency, reduce man hours. We've all done that kind of thing. So you have the ability to tell your story there. The other thing about the project is you can give credit to other people, your project team members, the stakeholders, the person that assigned you the project. It says who are the team members on there. You can add those names. They don't even have to be on LinkedIn. Just add the name. Then it gives you a project URL. And you can take that URL and, if the project has a URL, you can use that. If you have a newspaper article or an internal thing in your company that said, hey, this project did such and such, you put that URL in there. So all of this content is working for you 24/7, 365. So what you're beginning to see is that most people use LinkedIn like the front page of a newspaper. And there's really pages 2 through 9, a comic section, op-ed section, and that kind of stuff. So these are the back pages. And the way LinkedIn handles this is it doesn't force anybody to read this. They have to actually open this stuff up to read it. But that content that you're hanging in there is working for you 24/7, 365. Next slide. Okay, the project section. Well, we've talked a little bit about this, okay? And so it's where you solve a problem using qualitative and quantitative metrics, right? Now, the beautiful thing about the project section, say you did something in your experience section, where you're working now or you worked before, and there's a beautiful story there. But the problem is if you told the whole story, you take up all the space. So consequently, the beautiful thing is you can amplify things that are important to you in the project section. So that gives you the ability to have the content where you're only taking up maybe 100 characters here and there, and then amplify it in the project section. Next slide. Your recommendations on LinkedIn. Your recommendations are your vetted references, right? A lot of times people will say, hey, Joe, here's my references for this particular job. I said, I don't need your references. And they said, well, why is that? And I said, I'm going to your LinkedIn profile and getting your references. In fact, I know how to contact them. And when I've contacted it, I always say, hey, I'm Joe Frankie. I'm working, I'm a retained executive recruiter. I'm working on this particular assignment. I'm looking at Chris for this particular thing. Hey, can you tell me some more about it? I've never had anybody say no. And then secondly, if those references are out here in the public domain, hey, they're believable. Secondly, do you give recommendations? How do you take care of your people? You've got people that are important to you. Think about giving recommendations. It helps them. It doesn't hurt them. Next slide. The bottom line up front, if it's not on your LinkedIn profile, you never, ever, ever in your entire life have done it. Your LinkedIn profile is your billboard to the world. Next slide. Questions and discussions, or how can I help you? Next slide. Here are some resources. A lot of my people always ask, Joe, how did you come up with this philosophy? Well, I didn't. This guy that's a billionaire called Peter Guber, did. And he wrote a book. A billionaire doesn't have to write a book. And in his case, he owns either all or part of the Golden State Warriors, part of the LA Dodgers, and all of Mandalay Entertainment. So he wrote this book called Tell to Win. In other words, tell your story to win. And what he says is that the reason he's a billionaire is he tells stories. He got people to come to the table with a story, keeps people at the table with a story, and he closes his deal with a story. And not only him, but he gives several examples of other major businessmen. It's a good read. Words That Sell is, hey, we all kind of sound like ourselves after we write too much. It's a good little handbook. If you don't know anything about LinkedIn, Rock the World with LinkedIn 2.1, that is the basic primer. If you want to understand all the sections on LinkedIn and kind of have a good resource, that is it. Next slide. For our book, LinkedIn, the 5-Minute Drill, what we did is right where Lori left off with the book I just showed you. We assume you know that much. And that's why we wrote this book. This book is a 1-hour read, along with checklists and resources in the back. So the book, we competed it internationally. It's won gold award for career development, silver for business. And we wanted it to be a 1-hour read because who's got time? Anyway, this is how you can contact or follow me. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Joe. So folks, we'll now open up the floor for questions from our audience. Go ahead and ask your questions in the comment section and we'll load them onto the stream for Joe to answer. So Joe, here is our first question. So one of our audience member asks, I want to learn more about the use of hashtags and tags on LinkedIn. Would also like to know a little bit about those on Facebook pages. I feel like those two things are pretty universal for most of social media. So do you have any comments about hashtags and tags?
When I do a post, at least on LinkedIn, I try to vector it toward whoever the audience is, and that's a good way of using it. And I think the ability of what hashtags are being used for and how they're doing that is morphing with time. So what I would say is even stay relevant, but I use it to vector in if that comment goes to that particular area of engineering or something else, then I think a hashtag's appropriate. Plus, there's people that just put hashtag, this or that or the other. And so what they're doing is getting all the feed out there from those hashtags because that's how they want to view stuff. That's my nickel answer on that.
Great, thank you. So this next question, Aaron asks, Joe, what are your thoughts on LinkedIn endorsements and their effectiveness on making your profile stand out? So I think those endorsements might be talking about skill endorsements.
Yes. So there's two different things that get confused on LinkedIn. One is recommendations, and the other one is endorsements. Endorsements, you can have, I think, up to 50 right now on your profile. And so if you're thinking about, well, I don't have 50, just go to 40. Because what will happen is over time, you'll say, well, I really need this other one. And so you don't want to have to get rid of one to add one. But think about your area. Think about, I always cache everything in. What is the end in mind? What are you trying to do? Where are you trying to go? And when you answer that question, you know that, then everything else is a backward plan from that. So you would want the endorsements to do that. So LinkedIn is making endorsements more important because it is evaluating it in job applications, or when your LinkedIn profile is gathered by some of these systems, which LinkedIn is creating to help rack and stack people against each other.
Right. Thank you. So this next question, Ramnik, and Ramnik is actually one of our IEEE USA ebook authors. Great to hear from you, Ramnik. So Ramnik asks, do overwhelming details on LinkedIn, like including a lot of volunteer opportunities that they've worked on, also can they possibly create a negative impression as well?
There's probably more than one school of thought on that. Joe Frankie's school of thought is more is better. Okay. So to me, if you volunteered, you did. Okay. So why do you want to go down to a closet? I mean, if you did the stuff, why go into a closet with it? So what I would tell you is everything you volunteered on, if you've got 2,000 characters of content to volunteer on, put that. Let me give you an example. Each of the educations allow you 1,000 characters plus your activities and societies. So I'll get people that had profile and they just said, hey, I have a BS from such and such. So I said, you paid money and somebody handed you a degree. Oh no, it was a killer. I mean, the last year of engineering, it affected my health. I said, okay, well, where's that story? Why don't you put that story in there? I said, did you work your way through college? Well, yeah, I was working 25 hours a week. I said, put that in there. I get requirements for people that have had fiscal responsibility at the youngest age. How do I know that? I either got to ask you or you got to make it available on a LinkedIn profile. I've made more money, better relationships, more contact from a high school entry on a LinkedIn profile than any other entry on a LinkedIn profile. Because what do we all have in common in the United States of America? If you're on LinkedIn, you probably went to high school.
Fantastic.
Joe,
Thank you.
that actually brings up another question. Do you think that high school should be listed in your LinkedIn profile, especially after completing a bachelor's and master's degree?
I've had more executives contact me based on entries on my high school thing than any other entity on LinkedIn. Joe, I didn't realize, I did competitive poetry. Joe, I was an offensive center in high school. Joe, I went to American Legion Boys State. No, by the way, and the only way he would have ever found me is by searching for American Legion Boys State. And that ended up in a relationship, major project, all that kind of stuff. Because remember, I said the EQ was important. He told me that he used his IQ to solve this problem with 2 top 10 management organizations. I mean, consulting firms. All they did was take his money. He said he was robbed twice. And I said, well, why are you talking to me? He said, well, I'm going to use my EQ now. I said, well, I'm going to find somebody that I know and I trust. And you look like you've handled unstructured projects. And we talked for 2 or 3 hours about the Kursk Russian submarine operation. And he said, well, I think you can help me with that. And that led to engagement. And he's been back to the well. And I'm not the guy that could help him, but I referred him out. So a lot of times it's not about you getting this stuff. It's about you getting the inquiry and then passing the query on to your friends and family, your network. So on that trot line, so I got that fish, right? So I'm not going to keep that fish. So I'm not going to keep that fish, but I'm going to hand it to Chris, okay, because that's his bailiwick.
Absolutely. Now, I have a question I asked earlier in the chat discussion in reference to, is there an upper limit of having LinkedIn recommendations? Meaning, does it matter if you have 5 versus 50 recommendations?
Well, I think it all depends on, is something well written. I think I can tell more about an individual reading their recommendations because this is what other people say about them. Okay. And I'd say you need a minimum of 5. And why do you say that? And I would say, well, hell, you even have a mother and father, right? Do they love you? So you need 5 because with the higher recruiting LinkedIn tools, you could set a minimum of 5. So Um, I'd say if you're a professional, you need somewhere between 5 and 10, depending on where you are in your professional career. The more senior you are, the better. Is there an upper limit? I haven't seen any. And when people ask me, so well, Joe, how do I know you know anything about LinkedIn? I said, well, go to the last 75 recommendations, see what they got to say.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that statement. I feel like there it shouldn't really be an upper limit. I feel like with recommendations, probably do want to focus on more quality recommendations though. So
Quality trumps everything, even in
exactly.
your connections and everything. You don't need a million connections. What you need are quality connections.
Hmm. So yeah, I mean, like I feel like it's fine to have a lot of recommendations if they were all simply like one sentence recommendations. However, like this guy is great, then I feel like at that point it may hinder your profile. So, but I do definitely agree with most of you with your
Yeah.
statements.
So, I mean, the nice thing about the recommendation section is I've gotten some that were poorly written and off track. And so I don't, I can either choose to post them or not. So I don't post them. But the beautiful thing is when that person looks at my profile, he will see their recommendation.
Right. Thank you, Joe. So this next question, your I bring 40 years in your descriptions. Is there a potential for age pushback?
Oh, absolutely. I'm 69 years old. And, and I get calls from recruiters too. And the first thing I do is, look, I'm 69. And in a couple of cases in the last 2 or 3 months, he said, Joe, but you're my purple unicorn. And I said, well, what are you talking about? He said, well, you're the number one guy. And I said, well, send me the position spec. So we got the position spec. And sure enough, I mean, uh, but, I have a lot of content on my profile, right?
Yeah.
So if you don't have the content, you can't be the purple unicorn, So in this case, the job was 100% travel. You lived in 3 different apartments on the planet Earth. The money was out there. I had the experience dealing with foreign ministers and that kind of stuff. It was just but I want to stay married. So if I was single, that'd be a good deal. But that one was just, hey, you were going to be a problem solver, and it was for a Fortune 100 company, and you're just going to fly, parachute in, and take over the day.
Mhm. Great, thank you. So
Hey,
our audience,
let me
oh,
continue one thing because
sure.
he asked about 40 years on a pushback. If somebody is going to discriminate with you on age, get it over with upfront.
Mm,
Yeah.
Because if you're working with
Yeah.
people that are going to eventually discriminate against you on age, okay, then why do you want to go through all the hassle of going to the interview and all that kind of stuff when they're going to say no? What you want to do is get to know as fast as you can, and so that you can be working on something that's going to work for you. So I'm a fast person to get to multiple no's in search of the yes.
right, absolutely. Saves you a lot of trouble.
I mean,
As well.
time is your most precious resource when you're out there, hunting and pecking.
Mhm. So this next question, I think our audience member wants some clarification. I believe search results for people with certain keywords will by default be ordered by largest network connections first in decreasing order. To my knowledge, with LinkedIn, I believe LinkedIn doesn't have one single way of ordering connections. I feel like they're based on its algorithms. It really depends on the quality of the profile. Connections is just one of those. But any thoughts on that?
If we could break the code on how the algorithm was working, I'd be in the Bahamas, with the big boat. Okay,
Mm,
so they change it because if I run the exact same search a week later, not that those people have gotten off LinkedIn, but I get different results.
Mhm.
right.
So what happens is the algorithm is constantly morphing. So what do I know that's important to you on the front end? What's important to you on the front end is your background photo, your profile photo, the headline. The headline is it. If you don't have the headline, it drives everything. Okay. And then the first three sentences of your about section, because you got to get somebody to open up your profile.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, definitely. I feel like if it was ordered by just the largest net number of connections, then everyone would just be going on a connect spree, and I feel like
Yeah.
that just gets
Quality matters. And the guy that was one of the major designers. In fact, he's a German fellow, and his name escapes me at the moment. But he wanted to replicate a small German town where everybody knew anybody. So
Mhm.
eventually, in the very beginning, LinkedIn thought you could have immense success with like 75 connections.
Mhm.
So what happens is you end up having to compete with Facebook and other things. So the idea was to replicate a German town where virtually you would know everybody.
Right. Gotcha. So, folks, we're going to give about 10 more minutes for questions. We'll try to get through as many of them as we can.
Hey, Jonathan, I have a comment to make really
Yeah,
quick.
absolutely.
Uh, just for our audience, IEEE USA is actually purchasing about 5 to 10 books that will be randomly given away after completion of the survey that will be sent out after today's webinar.
Absolutely. Thank you for that notice, Chris. Yes, so folks, as I did mention this earlier in the beginning of the webinar. So, folks, as Christopher said, we will be sending out a feedback survey after this webinar ends. So please be on the lookout in your emails for that feedback survey. We really, really appreciate your thoughts as well. So, Joe, this next question from Joe. Joe asks,
Yeah.
I usually adjust my resume so that it's targeted towards the specific needs of the company I'm applying to. I also control which resume each company sees. How does one do this on LinkedIn?
Well, LinkedIn is not your resume, although they have added resume features, Microsoft Office resume features on LinkedIn. And so remember, LinkedIn is your warehouse. It's everything about you. Remember, the company wants to know what you can do for the company. But LinkedIn has, hey, what you did for your high school, what you did for your university, all of this other kinds of content. And you're and and you're looking at me and saying, well, what's that got to do with anything? What I've learned over time is your mind has no idea how somebody else's mind works. And so if you have it and you got the content, you think it's good, use it. The worst that could happen is nothing. But what I found by putting that content out there, I have ended up, for example, I'm a blood donor. So I've had two CEOs contact me, and first you get a phone call, then you kind of establish a relationship. I always ask somebody, how'd you find me? He said, well, you're a blood donor. And I said, what's that got to do with anything? And they said, well, I have a child that requires frequent blood donation. So I've decided, if I can find a blood donor, I'm going to do business with them and give back. So if you're a blood donor, I would say, and you volunteer, I've got it out there. And I put all my licenses and certifications. I can't tell you how many engineers I have. They say, well, I'm an engineer. And I said, well, you don't have any license on LinkedIn. Well, I'm a PE from this state and that state. And I said, no, you're not. Because this is what I come in the category of, okay, what you're telling me is you're coming here to the ball game. You don't have your helmet and you don't have any shoes. And you're asking me to put you in. What I'm going to tell you is, okay, why don't you sit on the bench and, we'll deal with you maybe the next game. So my point is, if stuff's important to you, you want to be looked at for opportunities, you got to be show ready. I mean, the HR recruiting world, mine, okay, we like to hit the easy button. And so that means that you got to wrap yourself up, in really good paper, have a nice box, good ribbon, all that stuff. In other words, you got to do everybody's else's work for them. And the reason that's important is you can. In other words, you can package yourself up. And if you think about it out to the third differential, right, of an equation, LinkedIn gives you all the places to hang all this content so that in any interview, if you ever answered a question that wasn't already in your LinkedIn profile, then you're lacking content in your LinkedIn profile. So all that content, you say, well, Joe, that's a lot of content. Well, I have at least 69 projects, on mine. But when somebody says, Joe, do you have any experience with this? Well, take a look at this project. Take a look at these 3 projects. And oh, by the way, the project team members are listed. So guess what? They could contact the project team members. So it's self-validating that you do good work. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I do see that the same audience member did clarify his question. Suppose I don't want everything I do to be posted as a billboard to the world, but I do want to control who sees what. So yeah, I know that you did mention that LinkedIn does have that feature where you can have your a resume. So I'm sure people, if that's the case, Joe, our audience member Joe, can just simply have the resume that he wants for potential employers or just the world to see, and then.
So yeah, if there's stuff you don't want on LinkedIn, you're right. I mean, don't put it out there. Professionally, I try to put as much stuff out there as I can. But I mean, the beautiful thing is it's your choice. And what I advise is, hey, if you don't want it out there, don't put it out there. And just assume that that's not working for you. It's not doing any heavy lifting for you. And what I espouse is get as much as you can out there to let it do the heavy lifting for you. Because the heavy lifting is happening right now. You are being searched on right this second as we speak.
Absolutely.
Hey, Joe, I have a comment that I sometimes talk to people about on LinkedIn. It goes actually right back to your fishing analogy, is that, update your profile and change it around. And if you're getting bites, then you at least have the potential of catching a fish, if you will. If your LinkedIn profile has not changed in the past year and you're not getting inquiries, you're not getting that visibility, then you probably need to use some different bait.
Absolutely. And, your LinkedIn profile is a journey. It's not a destination. So I am in there, mine. I revised the whole background picture, yesterday with the help of a graphic artist, on my profile, because I had it set up, the background picture, to get me board related positions. Okay. And so I accomplished that objective. I've been contacted, and I'm chairman of board of a startup and a board director on another company we're trying to take public. So now I wanted to switch venues and start talking about, hey, how do we build bridges for people? If you know where you are now and you know where you want to go, then build a LinkedIn bridge to get you there. I was out at a university speaking one day, and so this one lady was forced volunteer, how professors are. And she said, well, all I've done is been a shift leader at McDonald's. And I said, okay, let's take the first differential of that. We're engineers here. Shift leader at McDonald's. Okay. So did you hire and fire people? Yes. I said, okay. So you performed HR functions, as a shift leader. Were you responsible for cash fiscal responsibility? Yes, I had to sign out and in cash drawers. How many times do you have to do that? 3 times on each shift. Okay, so did you ever have to deal with the inventory? Well, yes, when stuff came off the shelf, then, it had to be marked here and that. So, okay. And then she said she had to rearrange the storeroom so they could handle more stuff because newer stuff was coming in. So you did planographing, for inventory layout. So by the time we finished, we'd taken a one sentence thing. I was a shift leader at McDonald's, to 2,000 characters of rich description of what this person's real experience was. Because, if you're going to fire somebody, I mean, somebody's going to be been through the counseling process. I mean, um, so not anybody can do that. So, and she had done that, and I asked all those kind of questions. And the bottom line is, people just think what they think. Sometimes they don't know to go to the first and second level differentials. Also, you can take somebody that makes a statement, well, hey, I've caught 6 fish today and lost 3. Okay, so let's take the integral of that. Okay, so how many times have you been fishing? What's your average? All of those kind of things. So there's a lot of power out there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joe. So this will be our final meeting, and Christopher, I believe you have to leave. Yeah. So thank you, Christopher, for joining us. Oh,
I do have to leave, but please continue on. And remember that IEEE USA is doing a number of these different sessions. I'd like to thank Joe for his time. It's greatly appreciated. I'm looking forward to grabbing a cup of coffee with you here in Houston.
Look forward to it.
yeah. Thank you so much for joining us as our guest host, Christopher. All right. Take care. And so, Joe, this final question, and is one that we've gotten similar questions throughout our live stream. So, Judah asks, should we put our degrees in our LinkedIn name?
That seems to be very common, but as I read the rules on LinkedIn, the only thing that's supposed to be in the name block is your name, and so that's why I haven't put my stuff up there, because it takes your last degree and puts it up there, up top, off to the right, so it's a matter of preference. If right now, you have to ask yourself, is if you ever do something that attracts LinkedIn attention to you, do you want to be in violation of anything? So I'd say it's a matter of preference. I don't use that because the only thing that's supposed to be up there is your name.
Gotcha. Thank you. So, folks, unfortunately, we are out of time. If we were not able to get to your question today, you can reach out to Joe. His contact information has been provided on the screen. You can also check out his book, LinkedIn, The 5-Minute Drill for Executive Networking Success. It's specifically written to provide as much insight into using LinkedIn for your needs in a short read form. So, Joe, thank you so much for joining us today and giving our audience your insights into leveraging LinkedIn to achieve desired results.
Hey, it was a pleasure and it was fun. And, don't forget, in the end, be a torchbearer for IEEE and, say what you do in the organization, organization section of the accomplishment block.
Absolutely. And yeah, I do believe I saw one of our members mentioning. There we go. Joshua said, make sure you have your IEEE membership listed in your LinkedIn profiles as well. So thank you for that, Josh. But yeah, thank you so much again. And thank you everyone for attending today's live stream webinar. As mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, IEEE USA's goal is to create programming that's valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. And as such, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. Check back daily on our social media for future live stream updates, and we hope you all have a great rest of your day.